There we go. Okay, I'm going to call the February 4th meeting to order. Daisy, can you confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act has properly been provided?
Yes, I can confirm the packet was posted and the required notice was provided.
Okay, thank you, Daisy. Are there any corrections to the minutes of the January 20?
I'm going to go ahead and
Yes.
call roll here.
Oh, sorry, I skipped that, Dean. I apologize.
We're going to check who's all here. Commissioner Sydow?
Here.
Commissioner Van Coveren?
Here.
Commissioner Alt? Commissioner Farber?
Here.
Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Commissioner Paget?
Here.
Commissioner Mike Sell?
Here.
Chair Waters?
Here.
Okay, we have 7 of the 8 appointed members here present. That constitutes a quorum, and we have provided notice of today's meeting, so you can now proceed with the minutes and the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you. Or if there's no corrections to the minutes of the January 21st meeting, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second. It has been moved and second to approve the minutes of the January 21st meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move into new business with the public hearing items.
We have a public hearing today that's scheduled on 3 combined applications, and they are application Z25-1, Plan Development District application 25-1, and final plat application 23-7B. And the zoning application is to rezone a parcel along Magnolia Road from agricultural to C5 service commercial. The Plan Development District application is for a property approximately 22 acres south of Magnolia Road to rezone from agricultural to Plan Development District multifamily residential. And then a companion item with that is a proposed final plat. And this all is occurring on a 29-acre tract of land that's located on the west side of Virginia Drive, south of Magnolia Road. And so we're not going to give reports on each individual item, but kind of give you an overview of the project as a whole. And just to kind of set the stage for that, I wanted to give an overview to the Planning Commission in terms of our application acceptance and review process. And so in this particular application, the pieces came in different stages, and the application was deemed to be complete, having all of its submittal requirements met. And so we scheduled the item for a public hearing. And so we billed about 35 days into that process, and we use that time between the time an application is filed and the hearing to try to work out items or issues that relate to a particular application or project. In this particular case, this is a very complex and multifaceted project, and we both parties had worked diligently to resolve those issues, and we still have a number that were unresolved at this point in time, but we have had the hearing, and so we're using this as an opportunity to introduce the Planning Commission to the project, because you will be the ultimate deciders on this, and to get input from the applicant and their design team and have them explain the project. And so we have put together a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to go through fairly quickly, and has a whole series of maps that we'll try to explain to look at this. But one way to look at this is kind of as a puzzle, and you've got the outer edge of the puzzle, which is Magnolia Road, Virginia Drive, and the south boundary, and then you've got the pieces that are internal to that fitting in. So we're gonna talk about both the internal piece, and then we're gonna talk about various aspects of the external piece. But the aerial photo here, the area highlighted in yellow, you can see is a very narrow and long area that abuts Dry Creek, and that is the subject property of these three applications. And we'll go ahead and this is the current zoning map, and so you can see that this is the Phase 1 area right here, which is currently under construction. This is Menards, American Ag Credit, and the piece that we're talking about this afternoon is all currently green. It came into the city zoned agricultural, pending a final plan submittal. If you want to go to the future land use map, this just shows that the land use map for this area was amended to show the housing component as urban residential, and the surrounding component is still commercial, and so that's the Magnolia frontage, the Menards property, and then the property directly south of Menards is still shown as commercial, and the areas to the south where Aeroplanes is and the remaining south piece is shown as future residential. There's also some floodplain in the area that particularly impacts the property to the west of Dry Creek, but the Dry Creek area itself is floodplain and floodway, which is mostly confined to its banks. There's a little bit of floodplain on the American Ag Credit and the proposed commercial lot, and then the property to the west of the creek has a lot of shallow floodplain that impacts it. This is kind of the grid of a utility system that was put in 2010 to support the Menards project and support this whole area, which was completely devoid of utilities. And one thing to note is that the interstate kind of serves as a barrier to having the utility system in the main portion of the city connect into this area. So this area is served and connects back to the west to utility lines that are in Centennial Road. And so this was built in a loop system to provide multiple sources of water flow, and there was a backbone of a sewer system that was put in as well. And so that's our starting point for designing a utility system for this development. So we're going to briefly just talk about the commercial lot rezoning. The applicants, this was part of the 41 acres that the Salina Destination purchased from the Marietta family, and they have requested that about a 1.4 acre tract of land that's on the south side of Magnolia Road be set aside for commercial development. And so it was annexed into the city in 2023, but has remained zoned agricultural and is not yet platted, pending a specific development proposal. So you can go to the next, Dustin. And so that's just a representation of where that commercial lot sits in relation to the project as the whole. So some of these you're going to see running north-south, and some of them are going to go from right to left. And so in these cases, left is going to be north, and so Magnolia Road is on the left-hand side of your screen, Virginia Drive at the top of the screen, and then the south boundaries on the right-hand side. So you can go ahead, Dustin. This is just a survey that shows the extent of the boundaries of the commercial tract that they're proposing to set aside. And then the second application is for creation of the Magnolia Village Planned Development District, and that is for, there's 11.2 acres that constitutes Phase 1 that the Planning Commission reviewed in 2023, and that project is under construction. It did not require any changes or improvements to Virginia Drive. It had frontage on the already established street, and so this application is to create a planned development district that has a development plan that shows the location, layout, and size of the proposed housing units. And so the plan that was submitted has a plan for 152 horizontal apartment units, and they're in the northern portion of the property. And then there's a plan to construct 3 apartment buildings containing 99 units on the southern lot. The majority of the internal utilities will be public, but the internal access drive will be privately owned and maintained. And the plan is to have entrances coming off Magnolia Road and Virginia Drive, and the request is for those to be gated entrances with controlled access. There are 2 detention areas that are shown along West Dry Creek to serve as stormwater runoff catch basins. And so we've identified in our report that there's still a number of corrections that need to be made to the plans and plat, and some unresolved issues relating to the utility line layout, fire protection, and storm drainage. And we have summarized those in your report in a corrections punch list. So as part of this, as a planned development district, they've requested some variations, and we're just going to go over those. One is they would like to build the horizontal apartments fairly close together, and so they've requested a minimum separation between residential buildings of 10 feet instead of the 15-foot standard that's in the zoning ordinance. They have requested a reduction in the required number of parking spaces for the horizontal apartments to go from 238 spaces that would be required to 228 spaces provided. And they are requesting a front yard setback variance to have a 0 setback. They have some units that would be garage units below and apartment units above, and they want to locate those so they would have a 0 setback from the private access drive. And then they are requesting a variation in the city's private street design standards, and so they're, if you've looked at the plans in your packet, they're proposing essentially to have a private drive that would be lined with on-street parking spaces for tenants. And so it is really a design that is more like a parking lot driving aisle, except for the portions connecting to the adjacent public streets. But it does need to be functioning as a private street, because for addressing purposes with the number of units proposed, it makes the most sense to give that private access drive a name and have it be a named private street so that we can use that for addressing all of the units. I'll go ahead. So this is just a map that shows the scope of the planned development district area. So the 3 apartment buildings would be at the right-hand side or south end, and the horizontal apartments in the middle with gated access way on Magnolia Road and Virginia Drive. And then the final piece of this is a final plat of Dry Creek Addition. And so the phase 1 was platted as Dry Creek Addition, and it's an 11.2 acre plat. They're now proposing to final plat the remaining 29 acres. And so as we discussed, they're proposing to plat a commercial lot along Magnolia Road, a center lot that would have the horizontal apartments, and then a third lot at the south end for 3 multi-level apartment buildings. And then again, the access would be from Magnolia Road and Virginia Drive, and Virginia Drive would need to be extended south as part of the development of phase 2. And then it might have been difficult to see on the plans, but there is a right-of-way set aside at the south end for a future east-west street that would be a connector to cross Dry Creek and over to Aeroplanes. And again, the plans and the plat are tied together, and so there are, when you make corrections or revisions to one, you affect the other. The other thing I would note with this is there is a development agreement associated with this project. It has some fairly aggressive timelines in it, and so for that reason, we're looking at the preliminary development plan and the final plat concurrently, but as we noted, they're very interrelated, so if you change or revise something on one, you affect the other. So that is the area being platted, and then as I mentioned, this is kind of like a puzzle piece where you've got the outside edge and the internal pieces. So we've also got some off-site components that we just want to go over with the Planning Commission so you understand those. Well, I guess first we'll talk about, just to give you an overview of the concept. When you hear the term horizontal apartments, that was kind of a new concept to staff, but the idea is that they are apartments, but they're apartments that are essentially like small individual houses. And so normally in your multifamily apartments, you've got next door neighbors with shared walls or shared units on top of your unit, but the idea here is they're individual rental units on a single platted lot, but they're separate from each other, and so you don't have necessarily shared common walls or neighbors on top of you or beside you, and there's a little space of usable ground around your unit. And so the idea is to maximize efficiency, to have internal circulation so you don't have and so we have a drive aisle that's flanked by perpendicular parking spaces. By doing that, you can have units behind units and have them connected with sidewalks and so, or paths. So you can have units placed behind one another, and they can be accessed from paths from the parking area. And so you have fewer internal hallways, no staircases. And so since each unit is detached, it can have windows on 4 sides and have more natural light and more cross ventilation. And so horizontal apartments have become an increasingly attractive alternative to home ownership for both young people and older adults looking to downsize or simplify their living arrangements. So you could look at it as a series of small houses or cottages, but they're designed for rental and not home ownership. So now we're going to look at just some of the off-site dedications. And so we've got some off-site dedications. We have, so I think one of the things that's, it's not readily apparent, and you have to look at it to see it, but if to continue the pattern that was established for Virginia Drive, essentially Virginia Drive is going to have a right-of-way of 60 feet. And in order to build Virginia Drive, 10 feet of that is coming off of this plat. The other 50 feet needs to come from the property owner to the east, which is GHS or GHZ out of Wichita. So I don't know if you can blow that up at all, Dustin, but if you look at you can barely see the red area for Virginia Drive is what would come from this plat. The yellow area has to come from the neighboring property owner. There's a small notch in the corner that would need to come from the Care Family Trust, and then the red portion running east-west is the connector that would go to the west. And so if you want to go back to the list, Dustin. So what we don't have right now is we either need the owners of the property to the east to be a co-applicant on the final plat, or we need to receive some sort of firm written commitment from them that they are willing to dedicate the 50 feet of public right-of-way that's needed to allow Virginia Drive to be extended. So we don't feel comfortable having you act on a development where we can't assure you that Virginia Drive can be built. And the only way it can be built is to have that commitment from GZH, the owner, to the east. We also have a notch in the corner that needs to be dedicated by the Care Trust, and that's a very small notch, but absent that, then that alignment would need to be modified slightly and shifted slightly to the north to eliminate that. The other thing that's been discussed is, was been some discussions that the developers would like to construct a temporary hammerhead at the south terminus, pending the construction of the road to the west, in lieu of having a temporary cul-de-sac turnaround like we have on Virginia Drive now. But the plans that you have in front of you today don't show either the cul-de-sac or the hammerhead, but to build the hammerhead, the temporary easement to construct that would have to be granted by the property owner to the east, and also the Care property to have that hammerhead extending east from Virginia Drive. And so the idea is that there's a place where the street terminates for vehicles and emergency vehicles to turn around and exit back to Magnolia. And we don't have a plan that's presented to us for that just yet. So I think we've covered the off-site dedications. And so one of the things we showed you, the overview of the property, and one thing that was carefully designed and planned out by the city was to have multiple sources of flow, so that, and you don't want a situation where you have the water line on Magnolia break, and then that's the sole source of water for Menards or for this area. So there is a 12-inch line that runs along the south side of the property that ties back to Centennial Road, and this provides a loop system with two sources of flow. And so you can see on that graphic there that we've basically got a system on three sides, and so that provides three different sources of flow to tie in for fire flow and fire protection purposes. And so the city's director of utilities, the fire marshal, and the city engineer are requiring that a separate water and fire protection system for phase 2 be provided, which is independent of phase 1, and that is due to the proposed density, the proximity of the housing units to each other, and the possibility of multiple fires. So what would constitute a separate system would mean connecting a line out to that 12-inch line in Magnolia, running it through the development, and then tying it into the line at the south end, and that would have the benefit of having a redundant source of fire flow for fire protection, but it would also provide fire protection to the rear or west side of the apartment units. And so one of the things that we noted as preparing for today's meeting is that the applicant's design engineer did not provide any water supply or fire coverage to the rear of the multi-story apartment buildings. And so the plan advocated by the fire marshal and the director of utilities provides a redundant source of fire flow and provides full protection for the multi-story apartment buildings. So I thought I might pause here and just introduce Martha Tasker, the director of utilities, and just have her give a quick word on the importance of the term redundancy and what that means in terms of fire flow and fire protection, and why we're trying to achieve redundancy on these projects.
Thank you. to kind of look back over the past 20 years that I've been with the city. It's been my goal to work with the fire department and developers to provide what I call two sources of supply to an area. So if we lose water supply from one direction or the other, we still have a source of water to deal with either domestic or the fire flows. And when I talked with Wayne Nelson earlier, we were going back to our mines. That's where we store stuff. And we thought of several different subdivisions that we've done this with, but just off of the top of their heads, we could come up with 8 or 10 of them. And those are, just, you could look at Stone Lake or Southview, or we call the Ryan Addition, and just all of the additions over on the east side that we have a dual source of water. So it's been really our practice to ensure that my words are, we want to make sure we can put the fire out. So that's been our goal, and to protect the public health and safety. And it has proved to be very useful in a time or two when we have an issue with the line break. We have valves that we can valve off, and the water can come from the north, the water can come from the south, it can go around Menards. They're all things that I don't want to get into that much of the detail with you, but we think ahead greatly about how we're going to get water to each and every one of these facilities from more than one direction. Dean, did I cover what you wanted said, or would you like me to say more?
No, I think we just want to point out that the plan that's before you today only ties this Phase 2 into Virginia Drive and doesn't have any separate connection to Magnolia or the line to the south. And so I just wanted Ms. Tasker to explain what her position was on that. And we've got just a couple quick examples that we've got on the screen that we put into the presentation. And one of those, this is Chapel Ridge, or the Chapel Apartments. That's just east of Central Mall. And in that case, that apartment complex has a water connection to a 20-inch line in Magnolia Road. Then it has a separate and independent connection into the 12-inch line that runs around and serves Central Mall. And so again, it's got two connections and two sources of flow, and that's what we strive for in any kind of multifamily setting. And then this is just an example. This is the reserves at Prairie Glen across from Jerry Ivy Park. It's primarily served off of Magnolia Road, but it has a secondary connection at the back that ties over to Ambassador Drive. And again, that provides a second source of flow if you had a main break or a mishap on the one source. So that is just to try to reinforce what the Fire Marshal and Director of Utilities are trying to achieve with this project. Then I think the next thing we wanted to cover is just what is going on with Magnolia Road. So we have Mr. Kowach here representing the engineering department, and the city of Salina has received a $1 million grant from KDOT, and that's to go towards making improvements to Magnolia Road adjacent to this development. And so the Phase 1 of those improvements extends from Virginia Drive to the western edge of this development. This will eventually be a multi-phase improvement project, but this kind of shows the red line there's the west terminus of the improvements, and then the east line is the center line of where their main entrance drive and gate would be off of Magnolia Road. And so that would be as part of that connection. And so some of those improvements consist of a one-lane roundabout at Magnolia Road and Virginia Drive intersection. Magnolia Road would be widened so that there would be two 12-foot travel lanes and a continuous center left turn lane. So we don't have to worry about left turn movements into this development from Magnolia, because there will be a center turn lane. There will also be a 10-foot hike-bike path constructed along the south side of Magnolia Road, and a 5-foot sidewalk on the north side. And then the other thing that's planned. Currently, there's a large open ditch on the north side, the Magnolia Road ditch that drains to Dry Creek, and that's going to be enclosed and covered. So that's kind of an overview of that project, but it relates to the project and relates to what we've discussed with the various moving parts related to the internal puzzle and the external puzzle. The other thing that we wanted to talk about is the extension of Virginia Drive, and so we would have Virginia Drive extend south to the southern boundary of this property, and then new public storm sewer improvements, and then as part of this, there will be right-of-way provided that will provide a street connection from the northeast corner of Aeroplanes to the south end of Virginia Drive, the southeast corner of this, to provide interconnectivity that would benefit both Aeroplanes and this property in terms of having some interconnectivity. It's anticipated that the east-west street improvements will be financed by the establishment of a special benefit district and probably Virginia Drive also. And so to make those pieces fit together, as we noted, we're going to get 10 feet of right-of-way as part of this plat, but we need to get a firm commitment and nail down the dedication of the 50-foot of right-of-way along the west boundary of the property to the east. There's a 20 by 50-foot tract in the very southeast corner. Because of the way the property lines fall, that actually falls on the care property. There is a section that would be dedicated on this plat, and then we would have to work with Vision One, or One Vision, the owner of the property to the west, to get that final piece in place, but that would allow that connection to take place. And as we noted, we don't have a plan yet that shows either a cul-de-sac or turnaround at that south end. And so we just wanted to go over quickly just some of we have a number of punch list items that relate to the plat. There are some that are surveying items that are of little interest to the Planning Commission. So I think we'll go to the next page. And so we have we don't have the right-of-way dedications clearly shown as on the plat, which would be 10 feet for Virginia Drive, 50 feet for the adjoining piece, and we do have the 60-foot shown. We don't yet have a name for the public street going along the south boundary. Obviously, we're going to have to come up with a name or have a name for you before it comes back for you to act, so we don't have an unnamed street. And then we don't have any preliminary design plans for the extension of Virginia Drive, and so we can't really respond to the possibility of a temporary hammerhead in lieu of a cul-de-sac turnaround unless we see some plans for how that would work. And so, these are the dedications that are outside the plat that are not yet in place, and that would be the co-applicant or co-application or firm commitment from the property owner to the east. We either need a commitment to get the dedication in the southeast corner, or the design will have to be shifted to avoid that property. We need some plan for either a temporary cul-de-sac or a hammerhead turnaround at the south end. And then there will be a piece on the One Vision property that we noted that will need to be dedicated. That's not this developer's responsibility. That will be a city responsibility to address that. And then one of the things that's important is there's restricted access along Magnolia, but the City Commission approved a break in access for the commercial lot in the northeast corner of that lot, but the final plat and site plans do not show that, and so we want that to be shown and reinforced on the plan, the exact location and dimensions of that. And then we have a number of utility easements for fire hydrants that aren't 20 feet in width. And then if we get a realignment and a changed layout for water and sewer lines, then those are going to affect the easements on the plat. And so, as we noted, the Director of Utilities and Fire Marshal are recommending a loop connection to the 12-inch line in Magnolia and to the 12-inch line and the south border to provide fire coverage and fire flows for the multi-story buildings. And then there's these items that are related to drainage that need to be ironed out. The plat shows the drainage easements as if they're separate ownership tracts and not part of Lot 2 or Lot 3, and that has made it confusing as far as the total size and acreage of those lots. So they just need to be designated as drainage easements and not as separate tracts. The city engineer, Mr. Nelson, has indicated he's not received plans or profiles for the detention ponds, and he's not able to confirm at this time that they provide the required detention storage volume. City engineer has also indicated that he doesn't have information about the outfall structures for the ponds. And we also do not have yet a drainage plan for proposed Lot 1, that commercial lot. So it's not clear at this time how runoff from the commercial lot will get west to West Dry Creek. And so those are some plat-related items. And then we have a number of items related to the Planned Development District. I think I'll have you skip over that one and go to the one where we talk about water and sewer, the next slide, I think, Dustin. So there's two components here. We've already covered the one. The one would be the that the Director of Utilities and Fire Marshal are requiring a separate water and fire protection system for Phase 2 that involves redundant sources of flow and also provides fire protection to the west or rear of the 3 apartment buildings at the south. The other thing that I wanted to make note of is Virginia Drive has 2 different line sizes in terms of sanitary sewer. When it was designed, it's got an 8-inch sanitary sewer line in the northern portion, and then right about south of where the existing cul-de-sac is, it enlarges to a 12-inch section of sewer line with a larger capacity. And so the design that was submitted for review has the Phase 2 area entering or discharging into that line into the 8-inch portion, which exceeds the capacity of that line. And so the sewer discharge needs to be rearranged so it discharges into the 12-inch portion of the line instead of the 8-inch portion. And I didn't know if you wanted to expand on that at all, Martha, in terms of the sewer capacity and how it relates to this project.
When this area was proposed several years ago, early 2000s, there was a lot of area that was included into this, from the Menards area clear south to the residential area that Dean has shown earlier on the maps, and aeroplanes and property owned by One Vision and even a small area. So this line was laid out based on KDHE design standards, which is what we still use today. And you might guess that it wasn't intended for 500 homes to be developed in this particular area. So in running through the calculations, that exceeds the capacity of that 8-inch line to the north and needs to tie in at a different location. And then we still have a large area of development, whether it's south of Menards and to the north, that still tie into the system. So there's other load coming into this system, so we need to think about where this ties in. But basically, at the end of the day, the Phase 1 8-inch sewer does not have capacity, in our opinion, based on KDHE standards to handle the Phase 2 portion. Is that, without drawing a picture with my hand, I'm not sure I made sense to you. Hopefully you followed that. Questions?
Yeah, so basically from this point north, it's 8-inch, and from that point south, that manhole, it's 12-inch, and we have a plan that has most of Phase 2 coming into the 8-inch portion instead of into the 12-inch portion. And so the Utilities Department thinks that needs to be reconfigured to get it discharged into the 12-inch portion.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. So there are just a couple other things that relate because this is the first development we've had that has proposed gated entries, and so the fire code allows for gated entries. There has to be at least a 12-foot minimum opening in the gate itself. The plans that we have don't allow for staff to confirm that the actual opening in the gates is 12 feet wide on each side, and we're also requesting, preferably in writing, that the method of operation for the gates, how it will be accessed by residents, how it will be accessed by emergency responders, would be provided so that we can have that answered for you. As we noted, there was no water supply or fire hydrants provided for the back side or west side of the south apartment buildings, and we don't have any preliminary street designs for Virginia Drive that show whether we'll have a temporary cul-de-sac or hammerhead. And so one other thing I would note is in the plans that we have on some drawings, the internal drive, most of the drawings label it as Avery Lane, and then we have some that label the same access drive as Magnolia Lane. And so we'll want to clarify that as to which name is being proposed for that, so there's consistency with that and we can use it for our addressing. And so if you want to go to the recommendation then, Dustin. So we have looked at this. The city has a development review team that we have representatives from the fire department, utilities department, and engineering department here for questions, but they have all been involved. This is a important project in terms of meeting some of the housing needs we have in the community, but we're at a point where we just don't think it's ready for you to take action on. And so your next available meetings are February 18th, March 4th, and March 18th. And so at the end of the hearing and discussion today, after you've got all your questions answered and we hear from the applicant and members of the public, our recommendation would be to postpone consideration of these items to a date in the future based on input we get from the applicant and their design team As we noted, we don't think February 14th is realistic, but March 4th is probably more realistic. And so we're recommending that you ask all the questions you have about this particular project, because we have all the departments represented, that you hear from the applicants, that you hear public input, and then based on feedback you get from the applicants, that you postpone consideration to probably the first or second meeting in March. So with that, we covered a lot of ground and a lot of slides, but staff, again, it's not just planning staff. If you have questions relating to fire, Magnolia Road, the utilities questions, we have all the departments represented. So.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Commissioners, are there any questions of Dean or the city staff in the audience?
I have a fire question, I guess, and certainly the fires we saw in Los Angeles make this kind of topical right now, but the request to go from 15 feet to 10 feet on the building distances, what kind of effect do the proximity of buildings have to the chance of the fire getting out of hand?
So obviously, if they're closer together, their radiant heat can catch the next one on fire. And we've also seen where, even in residential areas, that the fire goes from one house to the other. It's just all depends on, is it interior coming out of a window? Is it exterior? Vinyl siding, just different components like that. But yeah, the closer that you make it, the more risk of spread.
Is 10 feet a reasonable number?
With these buildings, the apartment complexes being fully sprinkled, we really aren't going to have to worry about the spread from the inside out. But we may have to worry about the outside, depending on what it's made of on the outside. If it's a concrete board or hardy siding, they don't burn, hardly at all. So that outside would just be the vegetation, which should be cut short. We shouldn't have much of a problem. But depends on what type of plantings there are. Everybody knows pampas grass burns really well if that's in the area. But the long and the short is, if the more distance you have between them, the safer you're going to be. But
Well, certainly we have in places in town where we have two houses that are within 10 feet of each other, so.
correct. And we have lost multiple houses at a time before in areas like that. It's just how advanced the fire is when we get there, and the resources when they show up. If it's out far on the edge of town, and that one station gets there first, and it's a few more minutes before the second one, they got a lot of work to do to control that from getting to the next one before they get help. So, yeah, we need to keep them a little bit separated. 10 feet on this project, like I said, if it's concrete siding or hardy board, we should be fine with 10 feet.
Thank you.
We just want to add that although the zoning code has a 15-foot separation, the building code allows a 10-foot separation. If it's less than 10 feet, then the firewalls have to be used and have a fire-rated exterior wall. But as long as 10 feet separation is maintained, there's not a requirement for fire rating.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of staff? right.
I had a question.
Yes, Austin, thank you.
First, I want to ask, I know it was briefly mentioned earlier, the bike lane introduction on Magnolia. Is that something that's relevant in this conversation? Because I have a question specifically regarding that.
Well, we have Mr. Kowach here from the engineering department that we could have him come to the podium if you want to ask him about the Magnolia Road project.
That would be great, yeah. So my main concern was, first, is this bike development, this bike path, like a raised thing? Like, is it on the same level, like elevation as the road, or is it more like a sidewalk elevation?
Jim Kowach, city engineer. The proposal right now is to, much like we have on East Crawford, there's a grass strip between the curb line and the bicycle or pedestrian path on the south side of the road, and then there'll also be a grass strip between the curb line and the 5-foot sidewalk on the north side of the road. It will generally be at about the height of the top of the curb. The curb and grass and sidewalk or pedestrian path will be about the same elevation.
Okay, thank you. I was concerned about the like physical barrier between bike path and cars.
Right. It will not be like in the roadway or an adjacent bicycle lane. It actually will be raised up on the curb. Right now we have a 5-foot sidewalk that extends from Ohio west on Magnolia on the south side of the road up and over the interstate, and then we plan on putting a 5-foot sidewalk from the interstate down to Virginia Drive, and the actual 10-foot path will start at Virginia Drive and then commence west. And subsequent phases of the project would carry that 10-foot bicycle or pedestrian path clear to Centennial Road. That answer your question also?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, that answers it.
I have a question, Jim, before you sit back down. So regarding the Magnolia area, the roundabout that's there, I was trying to look into it, roundabouts in general. On the drawing that shows, I don't know if you guys can pull it up real quick, is the outer, so you have your inner circle and then the outer circle. Is that what would be, I guess, considered like a truck apron?
Correct.
For them to go over the top
Correct.
of it?
This is just a single lane and roundabout. Sometimes there are 2-lane roundabouts to handle more volume, but we have 1 lane in each direction entering the roundabout. There's just 1 lane in each direction through the roundabout, and then the adjacent kind of right turn lanes are a little bit wider if you look at it. But the inside apron, because when a truck turns, the trailer kind of drags on the inside. It's raised up from the traveled way, but it's also not a raised curb or median. Allows that trailer to go up and over without breaking the concrete all up. So.
Okay. Yeah, being Menards right there, people, not just truck drivers, but people with trailers and stuff, I would be concerned because they have to go all the way around just to get in there. So
correct. It'll handle a lot of truck traffic, but one of the key things is just with the number of apartment buildings going in at this location, all of the future development in this phase and subsequent phases, there was some concern if you put a traffic signal here, it would back traffic up into the signal on the interstate, which would not have been good. The thing about a roundabout is it keeps traffic flowing, and it tends to slow people down. Your accidents are less severe because you have kind of side swipes instead of T-bones, but then it keeps traffic flowing, and the queues or the backups are minimized, even during peak periods.
yeah.
It keeps traffic flowing, but how does that interact with the bike path or shared path there?
There are, it's not shown on this particular drawing, but there are pedestrian crossings on Virginia Drive, and the proposed stub out on the north side as well. And there'll be pedestrian crossings up at the interstate ramps that will coincide with the traffic signals up there.
But there won't be a traffic signal here because of a roundabout?
No.
So they'll just have to go at their own pace?
Well, yes, like any marked pedestrian crossing, the vehicles are to yield to the people in the path or at the location, but there won't be a specific stop signal or anything that lights up telling them that the pedestrians have the right of way.
So walking through, if you have someone, let's say a college student living in Chapel Ridge, they're riding their bike up across the interstate over the bridge, will that look the same as it does basically for safety for the signals where, like where Dillon's is, Magnolia is, that corner when they cross?
Dillon's and Magnolia.
Like where Dillon's, is that Broadway or 9th? 9th. I always get
South
confused.
9th and Magnolia.
Yeah. So safety, thinking of safety, how would they, these bikers, would they expect the same type of signals?
Well, there'll be signals at the interstate ramps, but there are not any signals at the roundabout.
So how would they?
There's cross.
Well, can I throw something in there? The cool thing about a roundabout is the traffic goes one direction. So
Right.
if you're a pedestrian or a bicyclist, you're only going to look at people this way. The people the other way, there is no people the other way.
So there's no signals?
There's no pedestrian
Crosswalk.
signals at the roundabout.
There's the crosswalk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like on this drawing here, Virginia Drive is to the south. So their northbound traffic and southbound traffic would still be using Virginia Drive. So the pedestrian does need to watch for right turning vehicles out of the roundabout or people coming up Virginia Drive and wanting to proceed east on Magnolia Road. Referring to this, it doesn't show up on there. The farthest south crosswalk, on this picture here, Magnolia Drive, or Magnolia is from left to right. Virginia Drive is at the south. The entrance to the north is currently undeveloped property. But it stubs it out for future development if someone has developed there.
What would be in the in the middle of the roundabout? Is that going to be raised so people can't just go through?
Yeah, it's one of those delicate things that you want something to deter traffic or make sure that people have to slow down and actually, the roundabouts are big enough that they have to turn and slow down. But you want to be able to see across it because you're having to merge with those other intersections as you're traversing around the circle. So you want to be able to see across it, and you don't necessarily want something that if someone is impaired or has a medical, that they run into it and it's a really blunt obstacle that will cause a lot of damage to their vehicle. So it's not recommended that you put a big piece of artwork or a sign or anything in the middle. Usually some low elevation shrubs or something to kind of make it more scenic, but it won't necessarily have anything real large or something. You should still be able to see clear across it.
All right, any other questions of Mr. Kowach? Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, are there any other questions of the staff? Okay, hearing none, I would invite the applicant to come forward and provide information and comments.
My name is Dustin Marsh with Murphin Inc. I can't see the audiences, and I think Buck Driggs is in attendance, our civil engineer consultant. Thank you, Dean, for kind of running us through how we got to this point. And we've had a lot of work that we've completed these last couple of months to try to get us here. We've got some work left to do, but and I would just say, if you guys have any questions for us with Buck there, fire away.
I have a couple questions, Buck, if you could come to the podium. On the variations requested, if you could just elaborate on number 1 and 2, which were the variation on the 1510, and then secondly on the off-street parking spaces. Those two, if you could just provide
Right.
input.
So the variations as it relates to the distance between the buildings, I think we're trying to get a lot of units in a small amount of area.
Okay.
We're replicating two different projects they've done already in Florida that are very similar to this. So they're trying to get the same density that they have there. So I think that comes down to just trying to keep that prototype the same. It looks really nice. We've been down there twice to look at it, and if you get a chance to Google it or whatever, they're really nice products.
Okay.
But I think, again, it comes down to density. I mean,
Okay.
5 feet across that entire area makes a big difference.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other?
And
go
what
ahead.
about the rationale for the parking?
Oh,
Again, I
yes.
think we just fit as many as we could possibly in there. A lot of these units are 1 and 2 bedroom type units. What we've seen in other places is maybe kids that live there as well, single parent kids, workforce housing, that type of stuff. So we did go, I think, with the regs require, 2 parking stalls per unit?
They require 2 per unit for the first 20, and then it's 1.5 per
after
unit
that.
after that.
So we're real close to that, but again, it comes down to just square footage of the development. It's pretty compact if you've looked at it at all.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Driggs?
The mailbox that's in the area is kind of off to the side in a small, almost like little cul-de-sac area. Is there any issue with all those people there multiple people trying to get mail at one time and just getting stuck in there? Or?
I think those are consistent with what we see in other apartment complexes. A lot of people walk over there. They don't even actually pull in there and drive. You'll see them walk over, pick up their mail, drop off their trash, and so forth. So I would say that that's probably a bigger area than what they have at some of their other complexes, and it seems to work just fine.
Okay.
A lot of what they're doing here is modeled off of other projects they've done, so this isn't a new prototype for them.
The gated aspect that goes all the way around, is there any, I guess, gate openings other than the driveway openings? Or is that I think I saw on one of them there was maybe a walking
There
path or
are some
something?
connected pathways between Phase 2 and Phase 1 where they have a pool and a clubhouse. It'd be kind of difficult, I think. Dustin can try to magnify that, but they've got some pedestrian pathways that you can see there along the boundary of Phase 2 that provide pedestrian access, because there's a number of amenities in Phase 1 that they want to provide access to Phase 2 residents to, and so that would include the clubhouse and the pool area and those things. So they don't have vehicle connections, but they've got 2 pedestrian connections there to allow to walk from Phase 2 into Phase 1.
Okay. There, I don't remember which one I was looking at. I was on my phone, maybe I was looking at it backwards. Is there a sidewalk or anything that goes against that dry creek?
Oh, there's a planned path, walking trail back there.
Okay. Okay, that's, I guess, more what I was asking, if there would be like a gate to a path or if that's all gated all the way across.
No, there's
Okay.
no gates back there that we've planned or fencing or anything.
And then what would be the sidewalk width between the main buildings and then like for, I guess, the main walkways? Would it be like a full
I can't remember what we have. I'm guessing around 5 to 6 feet.
I think we got a 6-foot walk proposed
Okay.
everywhere.
And I think the city's got some pictures and stuff of kind of how that feels and looks on some of those other units. If you want to have access to it, I'm sure they provide it to you, but it's a nice look. Everything's landscaped up, looks nice, there's lighting.
Some of those houses are the same next to each other. Is there any like windows looking into windows on some of those? As somebody who has one of those right now, I
Dustin,
don't
you're
appreciate
the
that.
architectural
Like when you're doing your dishes?
guru.
Something like
No, we're very mindful of everything when it comes to these units, even where the HVAC pad gets mounted outdoors, so that it's, placed in a thoughtful way and not going to be intrusive to our patrons.
All right, any other questions?
I've got a question on the parking. Are the parking spots going to be assigned per the unit, or is it just a free-for-all?
think it's generally open to everybody.
Yeah, this is
It's
Jeremy Hurt. I was just going to jump in here, Dustin. Yeah, we've discovered through our other projects, it's better to have these just as open parking, kind of as a first come, first serve. Certain people are working different hours of the day or have school different hours of the day. It just helps on the parking load if you leave those open. And then to also mention up by the mail, we will probably have one or two kind of, 5-minute parking stalls. We'll mark those. And that way that's just for people coming to check mail, to come in and out up there. So
would that reduce the number of actual parking stalls then even more?
Probably a few, probably, yeah.
I think the fire marshal mentioned these buildings are sprinkled, the housing ones, or just the apartments? Just the apartments. Okay, I was confused on that part. So.
Okay, any other questions of Mr. Driggs? All right, thank you. All right, commissioners. Oh, yes, Lauren.
Madam Chair, Commissioners,
Yes.
Lauren Driscoll, Director of Community and Development Services. Dean and I just kind of missed each other as he was coming down to the meeting. I understand Jeremy Hurt is on the phone now. He did call as we were coming down to the meeting, and he can probably elaborate on this, but was hoping that the item would be postponed to 3/4, would be their ideal next date for this item to be heard. So I'll let him, now that he's on Zoom, elaborate on that bit, but I wanted to confirm that that's the date that we're hoping for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are there, commissioners, do you have any other questions for staff or the applicant?
Dean, does that 3/4 date work for you guys? Is that doable?
Certainly will require close cooperation with us and the design team for the applicant, but we think that 4 weeks is a realistic window, more so than trying to turn it around for the 18th. And so everyone will give every effort we have to bring this back more closely sewn up than right where we have it today.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak in the room today? Okay, Dustin, oh, yes, go ahead, Mr. Mays.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Jeff Mace. I'm with Compro Realty, 157 South 7th. I'm here this afternoon on behalf of Larry and Susan Kerr. They're at 2750 Virginia Drive. We've had the opportunity to meet in person a couple times and on the phone. I'll note that staff, specifically Mr. Andrew, has been fantastic in keeping us up to date, and so we've been fully notified and have seen everything occur. I think you're all familiar with where they live. They live in that 41 acres just south of all of this. They purchased the property from Mr. Hills pre-Menards, but there was talk at the moment that when they purchased about future development. And the first thing I'd like you to hear from me this evening is they recognize fully where they're at. They understand the future development for the community. By no means want to stand in the way of any of that. Be that, although their property's not affected or targeted specifically where they would need to sell. They understand that those days are coming and want to be good stewards, not only for their family, but also for the community's development. So any of my comments I'd like to preface with the idea that they want to be supportive. When we first sat down and started looking at this plan, and I've been in the business a long time, but certainly not a developer or a land planner, it struck us as funny that we have the multi-story, high-rise, high-impact apartments on the north end that are under construction today, and then we're going to these horizontal, more like single-family unit-looking units, and then we're coming back and we're bookending on the south end with, again, 3-story, high-impact apartment complexes. It didn't seem to make sense, and certainly from my perspective as a developer, it seemed to kind of break the pattern of a typical land use pattern. That why aren't we putting these multifamily or these high-rise multifamilies up against the existing units and then sliding everything south? The comp plan as it exists today, I think, references suburban residential for the CARES 41 acres there, which is again an idea of single-family units. So why are we entertaining bookending? And in talking to staff, and I'd certainly invite and appreciate Dean's comments in this regard, But in asking the question to staff, it seemed like the focus of the developer was to get these horizontal apartments up and going. But with the need to maximize the 500 units, they just kind of placed this down south for now because they're not, they're wanting, and I completely get lease up, completely understand. Let's see how they perform in the market before we go invest all this. The CARES would be, the plan as it exists today, we would have 3 stories looking into their backyard. Again, they know development's coming. They're going to be easy to work with. We have absolutely no objection whatsoever to the rezoning of any sort. But it seems to us that it makes more sense for the 3-story, multi-story apartments to be up against the commercial zoning. And then as you flow through the development and get up against aeroplanes, and the future land use plans calls for single family going into the residential down south, that just seemed to make a lot more sense to us, and that would be our desire. Again, I understand where that may not fit from a lease-up standpoint for the developer, but if we could reserve, rather than saying carving out on the very south end for future development, we're going to build these apartment complexes, if we could reserve that further north, that just seemed to make a lot more sense to the Care family as a whole. Again, no objections to anything relative to the zoning. We'll more than happy to sit down and work with them, to the easement and the things to continue the development. There's some small items, the shelter belt out there, believe it or not, is an important element to living out there. As we look at the property lines, they've already started planning replacement. Those are some details for the plan development conversation, but we thought it was appropriate to be in front of you today as you consider these things. If you were in agreement of any of that, if I were the developer, Salina destination, I'd want to hear some of that. But that was our big concern as we looked at the plan. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. It's pretty simple, straightforward. All right, thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mays.
Good afternoon. My name is John Blanchard. I have 3 areas that I have written down to look at. First of all, I'd like to thank the city clerk for forwarding a copy of that. It was a big packet, so a lot to read, but I appreciate that. The 3 areas I want to focus on are the rezone and questions that are general in nature, some site planning questions that relate to not only what Mr. Mays mentioned, but also to the single-family component of this. And then the third is that the future expansion of the roundabout and the street, Virginia Avenue or whatever it's called, moving forward. As far as the general and rezone questions, in your packet for rezone, there is a question that asks, when you're looking for findings, it says, have you looked at floodways and utilities and all those things? And it has occurred to me that throughout all of the discussions that we've had, and I couldn't find anything in the packet, we don't mention anything about the shilling cleanup. On that particular site, Phase 1 and Phase 2, there have been a Phase 1 EPA, or environmental site assessment, Phase 1 and Phase 2, for the overall property, and for Phase 2, there's been at least a Phase 1 environmental site assessment that have identified, and the corrective action decision from KDHE also shows that there is a groundwater plume that extends almost through both Phase 1 and Phase 2 of this property out close to Virginia Drive. Now, on the maps and everything, it's identified as Plume E. Plume E is strictly a groundwater. It is not a soil, it does not have soil contaminants. It has groundwater contaminants. But there are certain issues that I think need to be addressed concerning construction, storage, testing, and those things on the groundwater contamination. Those questions do include also, what is the depth of that groundwater? I think that there should be something in the packet for the Planning Commission. There should be something in the packet for residents to know that those contaminants exist, even though you're using city water and you're not going to be drilling wells out there. It is a mapped contaminant, and I think the public deserves to know that there are considerations being made maybe as to what happens in the future there, but also questions such as, will there be a disclosure to future residents of that area? So my ask on just that portion is that since you have time to include it, that the staff include to planning commissioners all of those relative documents that pertain to groundwater contaminations underneath the buildings. And I would ask that any of the soils that are stored in that area be sampled or tested, and that future monitoring wells be put into place. I will just add that the City Commission, when they did their development agreement with Salina Destination Development, the city has agreed to pay for the cost of any cleanups, any remediations, any monitorings, any testing, any of those things related to this. So this is not a burden that you would be placing on the developer, and that's not what I'm asking for. I'm just asking that we look at all of those things. I want to get to the site planning, because also within your packet there is a section 3674.1, which is the street design standards. And one of the things in looking at the site plan for this project is that as I think they mentioned, it's just like a single lane parking lot. It's 90-degree parking on either side of a drive lane. 3674.1A, number 2, says that what you're trying to do is you're trying to afford satisfactory access to police, firefighting, snow removal, sanitation, and road maintenance equipment. And I would just say the issues that I have with the site plan are that, and it was brought up about the mailboxes, I do think that would be problematic, because in Salina, as you know, everybody likes to drive to that mailbox. So I think you will have some congestion there. On the site plan, I could only identify 2 locations of dumpsters. And if you have housing along the streets and then you have a row of housing behind those, double stacking, I can only imagine what the snow removal would look like if you only have one drive lane. Everybody that's parked in that parking is going to be plowed in. If you've ever shoveled your driveway, you'll know what I'm talking about. So there's snow removal issues. If the paramedics show up to any of that stuff, it's likely that the traffic is going to be impacted both way on those. And any road maintenance or even lawn maintenance people that would show up to do that, anybody that needs to park a trailer somewhere, you're parking in a very limited space with people needing to get in and out beside you. There's really no blank areas on that street. It's either parking or drive lane. So I see that to be an issue, and if we do pass all of these variations, then we're looking at setting precedents that I don't know why anybody else in town wouldn't want to come along and do kind of the same type project. So those are my main concerns with the site plan. I will also say, I won't say too much about it because Mr. May has already touched on that thing, but it seems like we have a high intensity use and then we kind of take a break and then we go back to the high intensity use, which is actually adjacent to the only other residential, extremely low-density residential area on that plan. So I would do, I would look at, as he was mentioning, maybe look at a way that you might be able to get the developer to take another look at that. I just want to make another point about the snow removal, because they mentioned that you can look at some of these developments and they look really nice, and I'm sure they do. But they don't get the snow like we get in Florida. And I've done 90% of my work as a site planner. I've been a site planner, land planner for 37 years. Most of my work's been done in Utah and in the mountains, which is quite different than Salina, but Salina is quite different from Florida. And I think when you talk about people driving home, walking to their mailbox, putting their stuff at home and then getting out and walking back in the snow to their mailbox, I think that's an issue. And I think it's why the dumpsters are also an issue. And I think it's, I find some of the one level of parking and then people on the houses on the other side of it. I'll let people that decide to live there make that decision for themselves. But my third thing is just on the street extension that's going to go through this development, and then it looks like over to aeroplanes, and then ultimately that's going to go through. I'm assuming that ends up in Centennial Drive. And my question with that is, does that mean that the streets in aeroplanes are going to be collectors and not neighborhood streets? Because I will just bring your attention that the minimum curve radiuses on a collector street are 300-foot radius. And on a local street, it's half of that. So there are design implications that go along with if you're going to reclassify streets and what type of traffic they're going to carry. So I would just be concerned with that. And then the last thing is with the roundabout, is that what would be the timing of that, and what would be the timing of doing dual row housing, the 2 rows of housing? Because if you have a street, you're going to have construction vehicles and everything. It's going to be a very chaotic situation, and I'm just not sure if we're looking that far ahead. But anyway, those are some of the concerns I have, and I appreciate you giving me the time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blanchard. Are there any other comments from the public in the room today?
Does not look like we have anybody else from the public online.
Okay, thank you, Destin. All right. Are there any other questions of commissioners for staff or the applicant?
Might want to give the opportunity to the applicant just to address their rationale behind their design for the location of the horizontal housing versus the multifamily, if they would like to have a chance to address that question.
Sure. I think as we studied this, our agreement with the city was to provide 500 units, and we're trying to provide different product types within the city of Salina. And so in doing that, we were developing that site plan on phase 2 to incorporate the horizontal apartments as well as, some additional 3-story units. The 3-story unit buildings, we couldn't fit those on the north side just because it is a little tighter up there after, when you have the phase 1 apartments as well as the creek there. We just weren't able to fit those in over there. So that's why they're on the south end. There's more room to do that. Just a couple of other things on the trash. We are going to have a valet trash service that the tenants would be a part of, and we have a trash compactor, and we have those at other projects as well. So that'll that's why there's just kind of one central trash compactor there, but there'll be a service that picks up the trash a couple times a week from their front porch. And on the snow removal, I totally agree. This is different than Florida. And we have other projects in the Wichita area and throughout the Midwest. So we have plenty of equipment on site there for our maintenance team to address that as soon as we start getting weather. And occasionally you get the storm that is just, once every 10 years, and those are a little more problematic, but we get on it as soon as we can. So.
Okay, thank you. All right. Commissioners, I'll go ahead, Dean.
I think just to summarize, the request from the applicant is that if you were to consider postponing consideration of this, that you do so to postpone items 3.1A, B, and C to your March 4th meeting.
All right, Commissioners,
Yeah.
I entertain.
Yes, we'd like to do that.
Commissioners, I'd entertain a motion.
Before we do that, I have the same concern about the one lane in and out. They're calling it Avery Lane, I guess it is. Is there any option, any way of giving some room? I guess this is fresh in our mind because of this snowstorm that came through 3 or 4 weeks ago now. But so many people around town were blocked into their driveway, were blocked into their parking. And where do you put the snow in this facility as you're pushing it around with limited spaces? I'm not a land planner, so I don't know how you can address this and move it around. But if we're looking out for the public, something has to be adjusted.
Jeremy, I'm going to hop on that bandwagon too, but mine isn't in regards to snow removal. It's in regards to the apartment building. But with that single lane road going down there, you're putting the bulk of the traffic down that road. If you relocated that apartment building to the north, and I just did my pin measurement widthwise, and it looks like it would fit up there. But and again, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your project or anything, but you're putting the bulk of the traffic all down that one road. If you had that apartment building up on the north end, then that the traffic flow would be a lot less for those horizontal units down below.
Well, I think, it's really critical for us, for the horizontal apartments, for that to feel like a luxury product. And so you really need to separate the two. It's very important from a leasing and just long-term viability of being a tenant there. And so to mix the two is not really an option. So this was the best way for us to have a gated entry, provide two ways in and out.
So just to clarify, so everyone understands, there is a green space buffer right here, and there's no physical connection there. So all the circulation for the horizontal apartments is this entrance here, Virginia Drive, or entrance or exit, and then up at Magnolia, there's a separate and independent access and collection system for the apartments. So the apartment traffic is not using this same aisle that's serving the horizontal apartments. It's got its own separate and independent driveways on Virginia Drive and its own separate access and circulation. So from that standpoint, they're physically separate in terms of their traffic access and their impact. So they're not sending apartment traffic through the horizontal aparpents.
I see.
Thank you
Are those
for that.
gated?
What's that?
Is that gated also? Separate gated?
This is not gated down here. It's only the access to the horizontal apartments is here, and there's a gated entry, And here, there's a gated entry, and so this is separate, and then these are the two access points for the multi-story apartments, and they are not gated, and they're just, there's no connection between the access and circulation.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yes, thank you.
So the valet trash is only in the residential?
In the
That
horizontal apartments,
horizontal,
correct,
okay.
yes. They're two different housing models and housing types, and so they're designed to be distinct residential communities from each other.
Gotcha.
And as far as timing on that roundabout is for the parking, is that going to happen during that phase 2, or is it going to have to be completed before?
When you're speaking of the roundabout?
The roundabout entrance into off of Magnolia, Virginia.
You're talking about the Magnolia Road improvements, or are you talking
Yes.
about this entrance?
No, the Magnolia Road improvements.
Which comes first, right?
That would be referred to Mr. Kowach in terms of where we are with KDOT. We're working into final design, but he would have the calendar. My understanding is this housing project will proceed with construction before we get Magnolia Road under construction.
Commissioners, the roundabout project, we've got final plans just at the end of last year. We sent those final plans out to utility companies to work up their relocation plans and estimates. The deadline was last Friday. I didn't get them all back, but we're reviewing those utility relocation plans. And then we've also got some right-of-way and easements to acquire. That it's our hope to get this under bid or out to bids by this fall. And construction would commence either late this year or early next year, and expected at least to take one season to complete.
So would that be Magnolia going west to Schilling, or to?
It is from the interstate down to about halfway to Centennial.
So if you get the roundabout done, you build this development, but you don't have it done west of the development on Magnolia, and now you have to shut Magnolia off to construct it, all that traffic has to go through the roundabout up to the interstate, is that correct?
Right now, it's phased construction, that we're building a 3-lane section. And what we do on the existing 2-lane roadway is we widen to one side,
Okay.
improve it, keep 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, and then we widen to the other side. It's going to have cones and traffic control associated with it, but the road remains open in both directions.
I'm concerned about all the traffic from the apartments that are getting built now. You add all this to it, and you're going to send a lot of it to the east and some of it to the west, but that's going to be a traffic jam on top of that interstate trying to getting past to the right, going across the interstate, with all these cars at work hours, peak times.
Yeah, there's
There's
signals
something's gonna have to be done
at
there.
both ramps, and then there are left turn lanes
Yeah.
at those intersections, so the through traffic can cycle
Right,
through.
you have to get a right lane going on the interstate that's more, green light all the time.
Right.
There's a lot of cars over there.
There will be a lot more traffic once it's complete, but the proposed Magnolia Road improvements include the roundabout and the first, as Dean pointed out, the first intersection or entrance to these apartments.
So when you build
it'll
the
be 3 lanes to the east there.
When you build a roundabout, you're about going to have a temporary exit into Menards, aren't you, on Virginia?
Virginia Drive, I think it's 6 different sequences to try to build the roundabout and maintain 2-lane traffic in that area.
Yeah.
Because they got to build the pieces of the pie, basically.
So it's stopping the improvement first and then development second?
I would anticipate that the housing construction will get underway sometime this calendar year, whereas the Magnolia Road improvements will happen in 2026.
Bad. Progress is uncomfortable sometimes.
Lack of planning, perhaps, wasn't made.
And I heard a news story that they're supposed to start renting the first phase of apartments in March of next year. Was that correct? Does anybody have? Exactly sure. Okay. But I mean, we're talking about road improvements about that time as well. And you know, not just the roundabout, but also
This
the
is-
entrance into the horizontal apartments, not too far to the west there on Magnolia. And I concur, it's going to be
I would hope we wouldn't compromise one of our major retailers at Menards and causing a lot of congestion and trying to push this project through without having a fluid access to Menards.
Students too.
I think the city would have a black eye on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an important part is maintaining two-way traffic in each direction.
Yeah,
But there
it's very
will be,
important, yeah.
there will be, through construction, people are going slower and some people tend to avoid those areas.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kovacs.
Yeah, let me know if you have any other questions.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners, is there any more discussion?
I have a question, just maybe for the commissioners, pretty much. The requested variations, is everybody, I mean, I disagree with the parking. I think it needs to be more. That's just something but I know we're not voting on any of that right now, but something that they could look at for next time. I just didn't know if anybody else feels the same way.
I would agree with that because there's a lot of people that have small trailers, boats. You know, I know you rent you know what the perimeters are, but that still doesn't say I'm going to bring a trailer in there for the night to load something. Where am I going to park it? It's very limited. And I also see a lot of contention with, you got my parking spot, I want that one. Why don't we assign them? So just my input.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments from the commissioners? All right, I would entertain a motion.
Did you not have a motion? I thought somebody made a motion.
No,
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we postpone Z25-1, PDD 25-1, and P23-7B to the March 4th meeting.
Second.
Been moved and second to move the meeting to review these applications on March 4th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right. Dean, are there any other items for the commission?
We don't have any administrative items or preliminary discussion items. In terms of other business, we would just make note of the fact that we do have a meeting scheduled for February 18th, 2 weeks from today, and we have a plat to subdivide and separate out two houses owned by Church of the Cross over on Rush and Coronado from the Church of the Cross main facility, which has been purchased by Kansas Wesleyan University. And so it's just making sure that we get everybody's got good street access, maintains their utility access, and we have a good plan for turning one property into three. So that's what we have for the 18th, and then we've taken notes of all of your comments and have them in the minutes as well, so that we can make efforts to address the questions that were raised this evening, so that we can address those in our report. And we're trying to balance out overwhelming you with drawings and information with not providing you enough. So this is a complex project and has lots of pieces to it, and so we're trying to be thorough but not overwhelming. So we'll try to be thorough but organized on March 4th, so your issues and questions are addressed. So.
All right, I entertain a adjournment motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Yes.
Okay, moved and second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.